Hi everybody, and welcome back to video number 7 in chapter 15. And when we left off, we were looking at an example of the if converted method using other factors. So the conversion rate on a dilutive security may change during the period in which the security is outstanding. In this situation, the company uses the most dilutive conversion rate available. So for convertible preferred stock, the company does not subtract preferred dividends from net income in computing the numerator. Why not? Because for purposes of computing earnings per share, it assumed conversion of the convertible preferred to outstanding common shares. Okay. A company includes in diluted earnings per share stock options and warrants outstanding, whether or not presently exercisable, unless they are anti-dilutive. So for purposes of calculating the diluted earnings per share, a company assumes options and warrants are exercised if they are dilutive. Companies use the treasury stock method to include options and warrants in diluted earnings per share. As with the if converted method, the treasury stock method assumes the options or warrants are exercised at the beginning of the year or the date of issue if late. So if we look at these three steps using the treasury stock method, first we are going to calculate the cash proceeds the company is going to receive if all the options or warrants are exercised at the exercise price. Second, we're going to assume the company will use the cash proceeds to purchase common stock for the treasury. We assume the company pays the market price to purchase the treasury shares. As a result, the cash proceeds will not be sufficient to buy back all the shares needed to issue the option or warrant holders. Why? Because the options or warrants are dilutive, which means the exercise price is less than the market price of the stock. Number 3, we're going to calculate the number of incremental shares that would be issued to the option or warrant holders. We take the total number of shares to be issued to the option or warrant holders and subtract the number of treasury shares from step 2 to arrive at the incremental shares. The incremental shares will be added to the denominator of the diluted earnings per share. Okay, let's take a look at how we would do that. The Enzo Incorporated has 1,500 options outstanding at an exercise price of $30 for a common share and a common stock average market price per share of $50. The question is, what are the incremental shares outstanding applying the treasury stock method? The solution, the stock options are dilutive because the exercise price, $30, is less than the average market price, $50. So we follow those 3 steps. First, we calculate the cash proceeds to the company if the options are exercised. So that we would multiply 1,500 options times $30, which equals $45,000. Now, we're going to assume that the cash proceeds are used to purchase treasury stock at an average market price. So we'll take the $50 market price and divide it into the $45,000 that we calculated in number 1. That gives us 900 shares. So to calculate the incremental shares, we take the 1,500 shares, back out the 900 shares, leaving us with 600 incremental shares. The 600 incremental shares are added to the denominator of the diluted earnings per share. Okay, McElroy Industries Incorporated has net income for the period of $220,000 in this illustration. The weighted average number of shares outstanding was 100,000 shares. The number of shares related to options outstanding, although not exercisable at this time, at an option price of $20 per share, is 5,000 shares. The average market price of the common stock during the year was $28. How should McElroy compute its basic and fully diluted earnings per share? Well, let's look at basic earnings per share. That's pretty straightforward. We've done this before, and we get $2.20 by dividing 220,000 by 100,000 average number of common shares outstanding. For fully diluted, we'll take, just like we did in the prior slide, we'll take the 5,000 related shares related to options, multiply it times the exercise price per share. That gives us 100,000. The average market price is $28 per share. So the treasury shares that could be repurchased with the proceeds would be 3,571. So we subtract the 3,571 from the 5,000 shares, we get 1,429 potential common incremental shares. So the average number of common shares outstanding, we'll add that 1,429 to 100,000. We get 101,429. Divide that by that same $220,000, and we get $2.17 as the fully diluted earnings per share. And of course, it's less than the basic earnings per share, confirming that the options are in fact dilutive. All right, here we have contingent issue agreement. So here we can have a contingent shares issued as a result of 1, the passage of time condition, or 2, upon attainment of certain earnings or market price level. So antedilutive revisited, we're going to ignore antedilutive securities in all calculations in computing fully diluted earnings per share. So the contingent issue illustration here. Watts Corporation purchased Cardoza Company and agreed to give Cardoza's stockholders 20,000 additional shares in 2028 if Cardoza's net income in 2027 is 90,000 or more. In 2026, Cardoza's net income is 100,000. Should Cardoza include the contingent shares in computing earnings per share? Well, because Cardoza has already attained the 2027 stipulated earnings of 90,000 in 2026, in computing diluted earnings per share for 2026, Watts would include the 20,000 contingent shares in the shares outstanding computation. So if we look at an anti-dilution situation here, Stricker Company has a 6% $1 million debt issue that is convertible into 10,000 common shares. The net income for the year is 210,000. The weighted average number of common shares outstanding is 100,000, and the tax rate is 20%. Should Stricker include the effects of the convertible debt in its computation of diluted earnings per share? Well, in this situation, assumed conversion into common stock at the beginning of the year requires adjustments of net income and the weighted average number of shares. So here's our net income for the year given in the problem. We're going to add an adjustment for interest net of tax on 6% debentures. So we take the $60,000 times the 80%, 1 minus the tax rate, which gives us $48,000, which will add to the adjusted net income. Now, for the shares outstanding, we had 100,000 shares. We add the shares issued upon assumed conversion, which is 10,000 shares. So that gives us an average number of common and potential common shares outstanding of 110. And if we do that, our basic earnings per share hasn't changed at $2.10, but the diluted earnings per share of 258,000 divided by 110,000 is equal to $2.35, and that is anti-dilutive. So as a shortcut, Stricker can also identify convertible debt as anti-dilutive by comparing the earnings per share resulting from the conversion. And that's $4.80. We take the $48,000 here and divide it by the 10,000 additional shares. With the earnings per share before inclusion of $2.10, since $400.80 is greater than $2.10, the convertible bonds, therefore, must be anti-dilutive. Okay, so how do we present that and disclose that? A company should show the per share amounts for 1, income from continuing operations, 2, income from discontinued operations, and 3, net income. The per share amounts for discontinued operations should be presented on the face of the income statement or in the notes. So, complex capital structures and dual presentation of earnings per share require the following additional disclosures in note form. 1, description of pertinent rights and privileges of the various securities outstanding. 2, a reconciliation of the numerators and denominators of the basic and diluted per share computations, including individual income and share amount effects of all securities that affect earnings per share. Number 3, the effect given preferred dividends in determining income available to common stockholders in computing the basic earnings per share. 4, securities that could potentially dilute basic earnings per share in the future that were excluded in the computation because they would be anti-dilutive. And 5, the effects of conversions subsequent to year end, but before issuing the statements. So here we have earnings per share for common $3.30 and fully diluted earnings per share $2.70. And we would present that. Here's our basic earnings per share, income from continuing operations, discontinued operations, which was a loss. So our net income was $3 basic earnings per share. But our diluted earnings per share was $3.35 from continuing operations and 65 cents from discontinued operations loss, leaving us with $2.70 net income. Okay, if we reconcile basic and fully diluted earnings per share, I'll let you run through the arithmetic here, but here we have our numerators and denominators and our warrants, our convertible preferred stock, convertible bonds net of tax, and we get a different per share amount. So stock options to purchase 1 million shares of stock at $85 a share during 2025, but were not included in the computation. That looks like a good place to stop this video, and when we return, we'll continue on. Until that time, bye for now.